Good morning. Today we'll be covering asthma, the first condition out of all the conditions that we're doing. We will cover what it is, how we get it, what are the triggers, the current medical treatments that are present, and then we're going to go into thinking, thought experiments of how we can think differently about the disease, how it works according to nature, and some solutions or some ways to manage or to support asthma. So let's get started. First of all, there are three things that you have to remember when it comes to asthma. Well, number one is your airways basically swell up, and there is inflammation. So the reason why there is swelling is because of inflammation in your airways. So show some. So there is, like, you can just imagine inflammation. So inflammation leads to swelling, and then there is tightening of the airways. So if I had to draw like so these are your lungs, you can say almost, and then your trachea comes from here like that, from where your air flows through. This is the trachea, and then you have your lungs. You can almost, yeah, these are your airways, and over here at the end of the airways are your alveoli. So you can almost imagine them as small balls that when the air reaches there, they circulate, the air circulates around as soon as it reaches the alveoli. So in asthma, what happens is there is inflammation, which leads to swelling, and there is tightening of the chest. So tightening is one more. So there's inflammation, there's tightening, and then there is mucus production. So inflammation, tightening, and mucus production. Three things you have to remember. Keep this in mind because as we uncover ways of understanding asthma from a nature's perspective, you get to know why this is happening. This is my best way of drawing your airways. So as you can see, we mainly have this understanding of what happens when there is asthma, but why it happens is also the next understanding. So we'll go over that. I have this mind map over here, which you can read and you can learn. You can download it in the link in the bio section below. All right. So basically, the air goes in and out of your lungs as soon as you breathe in. Oxygen flows throughout your body. And in asthma, there are a few symptoms that you get because of these three particular, you can say, things that are happening when there's asthma, right? So these three things lead to things like wheezing, which is like whistling of your, like when you breathe in, there's like a whistle sound that you create. Like if you've ever heard a flute or blown into like a bamboo stick, right? So when there is a blockage because of inflammation, there is this wheezing sound, whistling sound, okay? So we have wheezing. And then we have what is shortness of breath because of tightening of the muscles, so the airways. The tightening of the airways lead to shortness of breath. Right, so that's that. And then we have chest tightness, like we mentioned here, tightening. Chest tightness when you cough. It's also another, especially at night or in the morning, those are two signs when there is a high level of, you can say, mucus production. Because of that, there's irritation, and because of irritation, you're coughing. When you're sick at night or during exercise, there's an increase in mucus production, which is why symptoms like wheezing and shortness of breath become worse when you have asthma. So that's the first understanding of asthma in a nutshell. What triggers it? So, like I mentioned earlier, we have exercise, we have the cold, strong fumes. So, like when you're running, after running, you sort of get tightness of chest if you have asthma. Strong emotions, stress, and allergens like pollution, as well as air pollutants and dust, mold. cold air and weather changes as well. So that is, and any sort of respiratory infections also lead to aggravation in the symptoms of asthma. Now we move on to the current medical treatment. There is quick relief, and then there is long-term control medications that you get prescribed if you do have asthma. Basically, all it does, all the medications, whether it's short quick relief and whether it's a long-term medication, all they do is the quick relief ones, they basically open up the airways instantly. It's like almost steroidal effect on the body. And they relax these muscles. So they relax the chest muscles, airway muscles, and it lasts around 4 to 6 hours. So that's what you have to kind of keep in mind, that the short term are more of just instant relaxation. So you can take a deep breath and catch your breath back. And mainly it's used whenever you get an asthma attack or whenever there is an emergency. And then we have the long-term daily medications, which basically reduce swelling in your body and your airways. And they're more effective, long-term use. Low doses are very safe, even for children. So these are medications that are designed, again, to reduce the swelling. Now, there are non-medical approaches as well to this, obviously avoiding pollutants, avoiding pollution, staying out of your triggers. So not exercising a lot, not going out in the cold too much, ensuring that your management of stress is there through yoga, meditation, staying away from flu and pneumonia vaccines. So that's also important. Prevents infections that trigger attacks. Also, a big thing, weight management. So losing excess can improve your lung health. And there are various breathing exercises as well, like the Buteyko method. I'll also talk about Ayurvedic breathing pranayama practices that you can do if you have asthma, which are very supportive in reducing the symptoms. Now let's move on to some questions. So this is the fun part. After we discuss what's actually happening, what is asthma, current definition, we go on to the fun part, which is actually uncovering it through the nature's perspective, which is 2 questions come to my mind. And when you start thinking about this, thinking about the process, it should start coming into your mind is, what, if you look at the lungs, right? What is it shaped as? If you look at the airways, the trachea, the airways, what is it shaped as? Is there something in nature like that that is shaped like our tracheas? And you'd be surprised that this is the doctrine of signatures, which basically means we replicate ourselves, we replicate our body, our organs, and nature replicates us. Whatever there is in nature, it's within us as well. So our lungs, the way this is designed, our airways, actually replicate a tree. Now, a good, like, if you think about the branches of a tree, how they're shaped, it's actually perfectly made to increase oxygen flow and surface area of oxygen, right? So when you breathe in, your body needs to use the most amount of oxygen. It cannot, low amount of oxygen is not sufficient, because oxygen helps reduce oxidation in the body. It helps reduce inflammation in the body. So you need to ensure that, the body needs to ensure that when there's a flow of oxygen, you are getting the most out of it. And the way it does that is through this design of trees and branches. So you literally have this root, which is your trachea, you can say, which goes into smaller branches and which goes into further smaller branches like twigs. And then you have small sockets or balls of alveoli all around the small twigs or the small airways, right? And you can almost look at it like leaves. So you're literally, it's like a upside down tree, your lungs. And it's insane. Like, if you really come out of it and think about it, right? Nature's designed us this way, and oxygen comes from trees, right? So it's like a recycling or a communication or a two-way process between nature and us, as our bodies are perfectly designed to take in as much oxygen, and the trees are perfectly designed to produce as much as oxygen as possible. So it's a beautiful two-way communication between the trees and us. So now we have this question, how do trees work? Right? So in order to solve asthma, in order to solve this swelling inflammation problem, we have to understand, how do trees work? What is the mechanisms of tree function? And the first thing we know is that oxygen is maximally utilized in this form. If we didn't have this form, if we didn't have this tree sort of form in us, oxygen would not be utilized to the utmost capacity. Because mucus is produced, right? Mucus is produced. You have to think about, how does a tree produce sap? So that's another question, right? So we're trying to crack asthma through the understanding of a tree. I know this is weird, but we have to do it. This is the way we think about our health, is we replicate it in nature. So one thing is sap production, mucus production, same thing. Pretty much, tree produces sap, we produce mucus. Second thing is, when does a tree swell up? Just think about, when does a tree swell up? When does a tree become weak, vulnerable, right? All your airways, all it is becoming weak, becoming inflamed. Inflammation leads to weakening. That's why there's tightness of chest. So because the airways are weak, we have to figure out what makes the tree branches weak. So I'll quickly pull this up for you. So if you look at the geometry of a lung, or the design of a lung, it's the same that replicates in nature. It's the same as the branches of a tree, river delts, lightning bolts, coral formations, and even blood vessels also work the same, and roots as well. So your lungs have about 300 alveoli, which is like sockets of alveoli, is like a bubble architecture. They're tiny air sacs in your lungs, perfectly spherical, like soap bubbles or a honeycomb cell. And we can also look at a few other things like dolphins and whales and birds in nature. So dolphins and whales are actually master breathers. So 80% to 90% of lung air per breath, and humans only do 15%. The airways can seal to prevent any water entering, so we can't do that. Some whales can hold their breath for over 90 minutes. And like we have normal breathing, right? We have, it's autonomous, it's not conscious, right? We breathe normally. We don't have to think about breathing. Whales and dolphins actually have to think and consciously breathe, unlike our system that we have. And then birds, air flows one way through the lung, unlike in and out. Air sacs act like bellows, keeping fresh air constantly flowing. This allows them to fly to extreme altitudes where oxygen is scarce. So again, everything in nature is designed in a way to maximize, to ensure there is complete utilization of whatever there is in nature, whatever there is in us. Okay? So it's basically the science of resourcefulness, or the design of resourcefulness. That's what nature teaches us. Coming back to, why do tree branches become weak? When do they become weak? When do they become vulnerable? The only way to think about this is, if you pluck a tree out of its position, right? So let's say this is the land, and you pluck it out. So you take out the tree from its position and you plant it somewhere else in a new environment. That's when the tree will become weak and vulnerable and prone to producing sap, to ensure that other bacteria, other environmental pollutants don't affect it, and it becomes like a friction, like a barrier. So the tree will produce its own sap to protect itself from external threats in the environment, and that's because it's vulnerable, right, inside. It's in a new location, it's in a new environment, and it's protecting itself. The branches become weak, the bark swells up, So airways swell up. You can almost think about airways as bark, as branches. And then mucus appears. So in a human, when you're most of the time asthma happens during childhood, or when you're born, you kind of develop asthma within that period of your childbirth. And the reason why, from this understanding of trees moving different environments, if you think about uh, immigration, if you think about parents moving from overseas to new country, or the child experiencing new environments all the time, moving houses all the time, changing people all the time, even that can also affect someone mentally, right? If you're constantly seeing new people, if you're constantly meeting, interacting with different environments, different types of energies of people, all of that makes you vulnerable. All of that makes your lungs vulnerable. And you're more likely to develop asthma in this scenario when you're weak, and there's a sort of there's lack of stability, lack of nourishment, because you're a child tree, right? Your lungs, like if you think about lungs as developing, when a tree is developing, it needs stability. It needs to be grounded. It needs to be in one environment, stable, to ensure that it nourishes, to ensure that it blossoms. But if it's kept on plucking and being placed over and over again in different environments, right? Just a small tree, and you're changing environments, changing locations, you're likely to develop asthma. You're likely to develop a weakening of your lungs. And this can also, this is not just like it's happening physically, but it's happening because of emotional fluctuations, right? Emotional data processing from your external environment that you're in, and you keep changing. You're not grounded. Yeah, you're not given the opportunity to grow to adolescence, or to a place where you can start thinking about yourself and then start making decisions. Because when you're young, your parents make your decisions for you, and you don't really have control. So if your parents keep doing this, you're likely to develop asthma. That is the theory behind how nature is connected with us in our lungs. One thing to know is that environments changing can also mean stressful conditions. It can also mean parental conflict, right? Your parents have two different emotions, it's two different environments. If there is no unity between the parents, if there's no unity before, during birth, and after birth of parents thinking, right? Your thought processes are also environments. That's also what we have to kind of take into account. We're just not talking about locations. It's also emotional environments. Same thing, right? As above, so below. So if we are emotionally fluctuating, right? And the other parent is also emotionally fluctuating, conflicts cause high stress. And there's data to show that parental conflict actually leads to higher risk of child developing asthma. Okay? And yeah, there's a lot of research and data showing this. Children, households where there's domestic violence also lead to a high increase of asthma in a child. So both stress, conflicts, domestic violence cause asthma. Parental depression, anxiety, again, this a root cause of parents going through a lot of stress is immigration. So you'll see that immigration actually comes up in a lot of conditions. There's a high risk for children with parents immigrating from another country to have certain diseases compared to children who are not immigrating. So you'll see immigration come up as a huge risk, health risks over time, as I go through explaining different diseases. It's a very common pattern that I've noticed throughout the conditions. Frequent moves, again, like I mentioned, frequent house moves increase asthma risk, chaotic home environments, and inflammation. Again, inflammation is caused from high stress. So whether it's emotionally, whether it's physically, there will be inflammation in the body. And if in Ayurveda, what they say is there is Vata, Pitta, and Kapha. So I'll explain Vata and Pitta, but I'll explain Kapha first. Kapha is basically water and earth. Okay, so it's the earth element mainly. And when you're growing as a child, you go through a phase of Kapha. So you have more earth and air energy within you. As you go after teenager, when you become a young adult, around 20, yeah, 20 to, you can say 50. 20 to 50 is the Pitta, which is fire and water. So you have a lot of energy within you. There's fire within you, ambition, career, right? Do things, movement. And then there is the Vata stage. Vata is space and air. So Vata stage is towards your retirement, towards your old age, where things slow down and you're more prone to getting Vata diseases like sleeplessness, like osteoporosis, where things dry up in your body. Too much air causes dryness, right? So if there's an increase of those elements in your body, you're likely to get that disease. Children are likely to get colds and flus because the immune system is weak, right? They're more prone to that because of Vata, because of Kapha. The water and earth elements are higher in their body, so they're easier to fluctuate. When they fluctuate, whether they increase or decrease in the body, and they're not stable, right? They're more prone. You're likely to get those conditions like flus and colds. So that in your childhood phase, when you're growing up, your lungs are developing. Everything's developing in your body, right? So you're prone to have more damage if they are grown dysfunctionally. If the child is not taken care of, if the parents prioritize something else over their child, the child doesn't get love, the child doesn't get support. The parents always think about themselves, not the child, when the parents' duty is to take care and nourish their offspring. That's the duty of a human being, right? If you've basically had an offspring, and the main duty of a human is to reproduce, right? So if you're not willing to take out time, if you're not willing to care for your offspring, which is your number one duty because you've reproduced, not the offspring will suffer in some other ways, right? It will develop asthma, it will develop other things, which I'll cover in later uh, sessions. Okay, so because it's a developmental age, it's the sole duty of a parent to take care first of their child, then their responsibilities. One thing to be clear here, brief stress, so small amount of stress, like, like wind attacking, or there's like a flood, right? It can be stress for a tree, but the tree will still stay stable. It's not that big of a stress. Okay, so brief amounts of stress, it's okay. Everybody will go through stress. Children go through stress. It's fine. But if it's traumatic, if it's like shifting locations, uh, like a tsunami, okay? I'm trying to make you think from both perspectives. Okay, so whether it's physically shifting locations or whether it's a tsunami over the tree, it's a massive amount of stress. It's traumatic stress. Domestic violence is traumatic stress. Parental conflicts is traumatic stress. Ongoing, in fact, like one day of parents fighting, it's not too bad. But if you're doing it every day, it's repeating that habit. It's taking that loop. It's making a loop, right, of the same habit, and that's reinforcing into the child. And it's constant hits of stress, right? It's like bullets striking towards a tree, and the tree over time becomes weak, right? And in the developmental stage, when it's supposed to grow, nourish, and become stable. If you have constant stress, right, you're likely to become asthmatic, especially in childhood. Now, like some people develop asthma later on their after 50, after 60, right? Some people develop later on, and that is also due to the same thing. Is they've constantly been hit by stress every single day. They're shifting locations. They don't know what to do. There's no stability. There's no ground. They haven't had the chance to grow, and that's why they've developed asthma. And you'll be surprised the amount of people you meet, and you ask them, how do they develop asthma? What did happen? And you always see a pattern of this. You always see a pattern of Maybe it's different people. Maybe it's constantly changing people. Maybe it's constantly changing environments. Maybe it's parental stress. You always see this pattern, right, of constant traumatic stress. All right, let's move on to one thing I want to also cover is if you look at the macro level, if you look at worldwide from, like, let's say you're out of the earth, your earth is over here, right? You're overlooking the entire, so let's say your lungs, let's expand that thinking. Let's say your lungs are the entire planet, okay? And you have literal trees around everywhere. You have trees covering the entire earth. Now, we humans want money, we humans want productivity, we humans want status. So what do? We cut down trees, we build buildings, right? And that's what creates pollution, because there is no trees to recycle air to increase oxygen flow, right? So if you look at cities like Delhi or most polluted cities in the world, I can only think of Delhi right now, Mumbai, whatever. Most polluted cities in the world. If you look at those cities, what have people done? They've basically cut down their lungs. They've cut down their lungs to build a second brain. If you look at brain as productivity, money, status, mind, they want a bigger brain. They want a bigger, they want to be smarter. They want to be known as more intelligent. So they try and cut down trees. They try and cut down their own lungs to become smarter, to become better. But it doesn't work, because you need the trees to increase oxygen flow in your body so you can think better. They're very abstract thinking, but I'll try my best to simplify it. So humans, because of greed, possessiveness, they want to control. They want to make more money without thinking about nature, without thinking about health. And if you look at a macro level, the more you cut down trees, the more there is no oxygen, the more your body can't have a flow of, like, there's no airflow in your body, right? And there is no airflow in the brain. And if there's no airflow in the brain, you're not productive. You basically become lazy. If there's a lot more carbon dioxide in your body, you become more lazy. You become less attentive, less active. So people don't think, like, governments, people, they don't think about this stuff. They don't think about, like, cutting down a tree. One tree won't really do anything, but it actually will. If you cut down one tree and you don't build another one, or you don't plant another one, the amount of damage you're doing to your own health. It's living. A tree is living. A building is not living. Okay, so we have to decipher between the two. If we cut down, if we damage a living thing, in the end, it's going to affect us and our lungs. So you go to Delhi right now, and everybody is suffocating. Everybody's suffocating. Literally smoking cigarettes, like 36 cigarettes a day. There was one stat that said if you in Delhi, you're literally smoking 36 cigarettes. Even if you wear a mask, it doesn't matter, because the pollution is to that level where there is no going back. Like, you're eventually going to suffocate. You've basically cut down your entire branches, your entire airways, and you're going to suffocate to death. That's the literal outcome. If man doesn't protect and conserve nature, that's the literal outcome that happens. If you look at macro level, right? So nature doesn't give you the results instantly. It doesn't give you the results straight away. Over a period of time, when everything compounds after years, that's when you start seeing the results. Everything in nature compounds. Nature is a compounding effect. That's what nature teaches us. So if we're taking care of our health, it will compound over time. It will become easier over time to take care of our health. If we don't take care of our health and we leave it as it is, there's only amount of threshold that your health can reach where it starts giving up on you. From a city level, from a macro level, if you run after status, if you run after money too much, if you're possessive about things, by the way, in Ayurveda, number one thing when it comes to asthma, even in Chinese medicine, they say cut out sugar. And guess what sugar does? In Ayurveda, the taste sugar actually leads to more attachment, more possessiveness, more greed, right? Addictiveness. And that's what cities like Delhi or cities where it's very polluted, there's no management of nature, they are dense populations of people trying to make more money, trying to increase their status, trying to work every single day, not really taking care of themselves, not really taking care of the nature that's within them, and eventually suffocating, their children suffocating as well. And the whole generation is having this compound effect of a result from them being too greedy, too selfish. In fact, if you're really selfish and if you can think logically, if you can think intelligently, if you're selfish, you won't cut down a tree because you know that the tree is important to take care of you, right? So if you're selfish and if you want to live a life, but if you're arrogant, that's different, right? If you're arrogant, you'll say the tree doesn't really matter because it's not giving me instant result. There is no impact on it on me. So I can just cut it down, build a building here, and make more money. But what does money do? It eventually goes to the hospital where you are suffocating. So it's a cycle. So an inflammatory diet can trigger asthma later on for women, mainly. And down the line, allergic asthma for external allergens, mucus producing like dairy and wheat. So this is different types. So this is different to this nature understanding of asthma. I'm moving on to more of an Ayurvedic understanding of asthma, just so I can show you the natural ways of supporting asthma. We can just go over this really quick because you know the cause of it. You can actually figure out what you need to do for asthma. So we know that there is swelling, there's inflammation, and there's tightening of the chest. So how do we reduce swelling? How do we reduce tightening? And that can improve our oxygen flow. I haven't written on this, but one thing that is very intuitive that comes to your mind is if you look at a tree and if you want to go hug the tree. I know this is really weird and this is not normal medicine, but we're not going to do, remember the first class, we're not going to do what everybody does because everybody's getting the same results. So we're going to move opposite in direction so we can win. Through cheating, we can win the game, okay? We're going to go hug a tree for 5 to 10 minutes a day and you hug the same tree, right? Because that builds stability. If you know that there's a tree in your park and you can go to it every day, that will build stability. And this will sound really weird, but we're here for this. All right, so fresh fruits, vegetables, omega-3 fatty acids all reduce inflammation in the body. Soy also helps. Green tea, organic plant foods. Avoid having any artificial dyes, food additives. So avoid any packaged foods. It's the same thing. Stay healthy, just avoid junk. Right? It basically increases inflammation. Sugar, junk, high fatty foods. Incompatible food combinations, so fish and milk, for example. Fruits and milk don't go together, so don't have them. Avoid milk, like I mentioned, so mainly have a plant-based diet if you can, because that's the least inflammatory diet. So what we're going to try and do is we're going to try and think of less inflammation in the body. So basically have an anti-inflammatory diet. That's what I meant to say. Okay. Avoid high salt. When women don't breastfeed their child, there's a higher risk of asthma. That's basically the same thing like I mentioned earlier, when parents are not taking care of their children, right? They don't have time for their children, you're likely to develop asthma. Okay. There are a few herbs. So we have licorice, we have coleus, ivy leaf, boswellia, ginkgo, aloe vera. Now you can try a few of these. You can try 1 to 2 herbs. Try for a month or 2, see if it works, and then if it's working, if it's helping you, again, if you see it's reducing your tightness, and if you're not having a lot of like heaviness in your chest, right? There's no mucus, and you feel easy, then it's a good sign. Within a 1 to 2 month span, it's a good sign that's improving. So you keep using that herbal medicine, right? You want to cycle your medicine, so you want to ensure that if you're taking any herbs, take it for 3 months and then take a break for a month and then repeat, okay, until the condition completely improves. Right, we have acupuncture is also one breathing method. So you can also do an alternate nostril breathing. So basically blocking your right nostril with your right thumb. Okay, so just going to block and we're going to breathe into the left and we're going to block the left and exhale through the right. And I'm going to breathe in through the right, exhale through the left, So this is alternate nostril breathing. You can do this when your eyes are closed. You can search this up on YouTube if you'd like, alternate nostril breathing. And I think I did a short video on this as well. I'll see if I can find it and link it below. It's called Anulom Vilom in Ayurveda or in Sanskrit. Probiotics help weight loss. Regular exercise very important to improve muscle health, oxygen flow, again, but no overactivity, right? So ensuring that like 15 to 30 minutes is good. Yoga is really good if you have asthma because it's slow, it's not intensive, and you don't get out of breath. You actually focus on your breath, right? So you deep breathe. In yoga, like breathing is the most important thing. So you take deep breaths in every pose. Inhale, exhale. So during attacks, there is panchakarma, which is massaging warm oil on your chest. Really helps reduce inflammation and increase oxygen flow because it reduces this tightness, relaxes the muscles. So inducing vomiting to eliminate kapha for instant release. It's also another way. Hot licorice tea with 5 to 10 drops of Maharana oil to liquefy kapha. May induce vomiting, so just be careful of that. Herbal formula. So 3 times a day with honey. You can take Sitta Paladi, Trikatu, Punarnava, and Abrak Bhasma. So this is just a formula you can make. A specific medicine. You can take it with honey 3 times daily, and that can help with these 3 things. Okay. And I've written some. You can read this. This is all available in the community. You can download it for free if you go into the community. The link is in the description below. Must eliminate mold, water damage. So it triggers asthma basically and increases the likelihood, most cases. Dust mites, pet dander, carpets, cigarette smoking, perfumes, scented products, air fresheners, and even melatonin supplements. It's not encouraged because it can worsen nocturnal asthma. Vitamins to support. So vitamin C is one of the biggest ones. Lowers histamine and that improves lung function. So vitamin C, very important. And reduces oxidation in the body, inflammation. And vitamin B6, if you have sulfite sensitivity especially, and B12, very important. All of this can come from, for example, red meat. So if you consume red meat, you can get all of this stuff, especially B6 and B12. Otherwise, try your best to eat fruits for vitamin C, or you can supplement if you need more. Over here it says different causes, right, of like effects. So we have environmental toxins, we have food additives, we have leaky gut triggering immune reactions. We have low stomach acid, high salt, antibiotics in infancy, hormones. So all of these can trigger and basically make your tree weak during development, right? So coming back to asthma, as we've discussed here today, if you look at a tree and if you feel, so first things first, you have to cut out sugar, that's one. Go hug a tree. I didn't write that in the mind map, but it's intuition. It's important to maintain a connection and stability. That's why you hug a tree. There is way more benefits than just stability when you hug a tree, okay? So that's that. And you want to get out of a polluted environment. It's very important. You want to ensure that you want to give your lungs the best health. So if there is toxicity in your environment, if there is pollution, whether it's people, whether it's emotional pollution, right? It can come in various different forms, the pollution. But you don't want to make your branches weak. So you have to prioritize yourself, right? You have to spend time in nature. If you're sitting behind a desk all day, every day, and you're not spending time in nature, you're not breathing oxygen flow fully, you're not doing yoga, you're not taking time out for yourself, and you're living in a cosmopolitan city, it will just get worse and worse over time. That's all I'm trying to say. Your health will compound. So it's very important to be conscious of where you're living, how your environment is. Does your environment respect nature? Last thing is, chasing status and chasing money, as we can see from a macro level. If you look at Delhi, you can see the buildings, you can see even cities like Dubai, you can see the buildings. There is no greenery, there is no nature. Right? So eventually, even though, for example, like the ocean produces a lot of oxygen, that's fine in Dubai, for example, but there's just so much dust. In Delhi, there is no sea. So eventually, what's going to happen is, like right now, there are people suffocating. It's just going to get worse and worse and worse over time. You have to really take into account how people's behaviors are when they're in a particular environment, right? If you really want to understand health, understand how people are behaving in certain environments, visit different countries, see what people are doing, right? See what they're interested in, see what their desires are, and you start noticing a pattern of their suffering, their misery, or either they're peaceful or relaxed. You'll see most cities, most people who are less depressed, who are more happy, more lively, they're more in nature. Cities with more trees, cities with more parks, they're more relaxed, they're more calm, they're more peaceful, they're less aggressive, they're less irritated, agitated, compared to cities where there's no trees, no parks, nowhere to go for oxygen, and you're just suffocating, right? Have a think about this, have a think about nature, have a think about how it affects you, where you're living, and whether you're spending less time with a tree or not. Okay? But yeah, thank you for watching. Have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you for the next class, which will be on ADHD. So that's the next disease we'll be covering. Because I chose that because it's sort of similar to asthma in terms of childhood development, right? So a lot of children have ADHD. It's a lot to do with parents, and I'll teach you that in the next class. Okay? That's it.